Hello, everybody. Welcome to Drat and Drake, episode 18 or 19 at this point. Special guest today. This is someone that I went to vet school with and that I've been keeping up with. Every so often, we'll kind of have little conversations here and there. He is a Ross alumni, 2018. Went to Cornell for his clinical year. Ended up, I think he now works in LA, and he's been doing some pretty cool stuff. This is Dr. Isaac Atalla.
Hey there. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
How's it going?
It's going, man. It's another
Yeah.
beautiful day in Southern California.
Yeah, like always.
Yeah, I could see the beautiful sun shining out of your window.
Yeah, that's why I sat here.
Yeah, it's
I
nice.
wanted a perfect angle.
Shout out to your Kobe Bryant jersey, by the way. Of course, I'm a
Yeah, I
Northern
was looking at
California
that.
guy.
Dude, I didn't even know you could see that because I practiced with the Zoom on
Uh-huh.
or the FaceTime app on my computer, and
Uh-huh.
it was like only like here, but now with Zoom, it's a little bit of a wider lens. But yeah, you can enjoy that for the rest of the
No, I love it, man.
podcast here.
I love it. Yeah, and I know
Yeah,
you've
it's
been
kind of
playing
like
guitar a lot.
annoying how there's different like aspect ratios to all the depending on which app you're on. So
Yeah.
it's nice you don't have
Yeah,
like dirty
and
basketball shorts in the
better.
corner.
No, you're good, Drake. You're good. All right. So, of course, one thing that you've always mentioned, I never actually was able to really kind of get into the details of this, but you talk about, you being born in LA or raised in LA. You have an
Yeah.
Egyptian Arabic background. Tell me about that.
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, I was born in Egypt in a city called Ismailia, and I was moved to the U.S. by my parents. At the time, I was about 1 year old. I think
Oh.
9 months to 12 months.
Wow.
They got here. They were both veterinarians in Egypt and decided very early on that they were going to try to become vets in America. And so they took different tests like the TOEFL and things like that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, a little bit of a tedious process, and they did a little clinical year. So we actually ended up moving to Iowa when my mom was in her clinics for a year before moving back down to Southern California, where they started a practice. So I was always sort of around veterinary medicine. Both my parents are vets. I became a vet, and then also both my sisters became vets. So it's like a whole family.
Were you
That's a
guys,
thing.
though you see those Chinese restaurants where the mom and dad own it and their kids always doing homework in the corner? Were you that kid at the veterinary hospital just doing your homework? Were you always there?
You know what, man? So I actually didn't. It was never really pushed on me. So much so that in high school, I actually didn't do very well at all in high school. I think I graduated like 480 something out of 570 something. Yeah, like my last semester or my last year, I can't remember exactly, but I have a 1.83
Oh my
GPA that year.
gosh.
Yeah, bro. Like school is not it
Yeah.
for me,
Look
man.
at you now, huh?
Yeah, yeah, bro. I thought I was gonna go to the military, and then after the military, have them regiment my life for me, and then it's a done deal.
So
You know.
how did you end up falling into vet med?
So it was actually my uncle. I don't even know that he knows this story. So my uncle and I had a conversation one time, and I think he was asking me like, "Hey, like, what are you gonna do?" And I'm telling him, "Well, I'm thinking about going to the military." And he was like, "Well, why don't you give college a try? And then if it ends up working out, you could just become a vet and work with your parents. It'd be a pretty sweet life." And so I just very like rationally made the decision to give community college a try. Obviously, my grades were so terrible in high school that I probably couldn't go to a university, and I didn't have the discipline, I didn't have the work ethic probably to even compete with university type students at the
Mhm.
time. I started at Cerritos Community College, and also I did some summers at Compton Community College just to get in extra classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, one thing led to another. I mean, lots of trial and error, lots of failures, but eventually I learned how to learn,
Uh-huh.
which is a process in itself, you know?
Absolutely.
And yeah, I ended up transferring to UC Davis, finished my bachelor's there, and then ended up at Ross through a family friend told us about it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So yeah, I would say very similar for me. I didn't always want to, like, a lot of people have stories where they always want to be a vet since they were a kid, and I never had that. I think mine was a little bit more, not so much of an emotional decision, but more of kind of almost evaluating my skills and my passions. I knew I wanted to be into science. And so my sister was a vet. So I was like, yeah, why don't I just try it out? And of course, they kind of grew from there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think most people like animals, like when they're kids, right? Like you're into like dinosaurs and lions and sharks and all that stuff. So there's always that like that genuine interest in animals, but to actually commit like a decade of your life to becoming a doctor, it's like a different
Yeah.
story. That needs logical,
Mm.
let's call it a logical commitment,
Well, so going into that, how are Egyptians, I mean, not even 20, 30 years ago, even now, how do they see animals as companions? And how does that almost translate into your experience as a vet in Western civilization?
So, I mean, I can't really speak on behalf of the Egyptian people in Egypt because I didn't
Sure.
really live
Mm.
there. Like I'm more American
Yeah.
culturally than anything else, So, but I think that it's veterinarians in Egypt are not regarded, the way we're regarded here, let's say.
Yeah.
It's like
Mhm.
it's like a real job here,
Yeah.
More like a trade over there that's
It's more, yeah, it's just not really respected the way it is here. And here, like
gotcha.
we're just we're so much better at it than many other places around the world. Like the training veterinarians get here is it's like true medical training.
Yeah.
You have a fundamental understanding of physiology and anatomy and so on and so forth,
Did your parents describe to you much about how their veterinary practice was in Egypt? Because I have no concept of,
Yeah,
are they little
so it's not
storefronts or how does that work?
so as far as I know, it's not really the small animal medicine is not really a thing. Most of the time, veterinarians in Egypt become veterinarians for large animal stuff. So like to help the farmers out to for the cattle and the sheep and whatnot.
So that's what it was
Okay,
like in like the 50s in the United States, essentially.
Right,
kind of, yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because from my background, that's kind of it's similar in the sense where, obviously, I mean, I'm not from China, but there's Chinese roots, and just the way the economy is built, the idea or the philosophy of pet companionship has grown. So now the image of a veterinarian in China, or in even let's say Hong Kong, really, that's kind of where my family's from, is developing more and more. But back then it's just an animal. And some will have a pet in the house, maybe, but for the most part, it was almost a luxury, if not, it just wasn't a standard.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
I think the same thing is true in Egypt. Like it's like Egypt now, from what I've been told,
Mhm.
it's a different ballgame where the upper class definitely have pets. They definitely tend to the pets' needs. They have veterinarians, and it's a lot has changed.
Yeah,
But that probably happens when societies just become more wealthy,
fair. I mean, yeah, it's a
you know.
luxury.
And
Makes
It's a
sense.
first world country
right,
to
right,
have a non-human thing to take care of.
Okay.
So
And I just want to say too,
right.
kind of going back to your path as far as not planning on becoming a vet in the beginning and then getting
Yeah,
to
yeah,
where you are now. I know you and Alfred have known each other for a while, and obviously we just met. But I just want to say I'm very impressed by the fact that, like you said, you were not really planning on going into it. You didn't really have the class rank that most people are trying to shoot for to become a vet, right? But to come from that level all the way to getting into vet school, I mean, that takes grit and that takes dedication. So I think it's a testament to
yeah. I mean,
awesome
as
job.
much as I appreciate you flattering me and the
No, no, no. I
compliment.
mean, it's sincere, right? Because I think honestly,
Isaac and I both
it's
said this earlier. We don't take compliments well.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
well,
genuinely, I think it's something that like everybody has their own path getting through here, right? And obviously, like there's some people that knew from the very beginning and had smaller jumps to each level, right? But
right.
like to me, that just sounded like a huge jump. That took work. I
I mean,
mean, I
from
wasn't
from
there for it, but that
a,
sounds like a
a
ton of work.
community college over to Cornell. I mean, that's a pretty
That's like awesome job,
Sounds like the title of my book.
right.
Yeah.
Hey, a signed copy. I'll buy it.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
stop
Now
it.
let's go a little bit back into Ross, right? Because
Yeah,
of course, we were in the same graduating class in the same semester, so we saw each other every day in the classroom. One thing I know you did very well in was one of the biggest filter classes, it being physiology with Dr. Reich. That must have
loved it.
been for me. I also did well in that class, and again, towards the later half of vet school, I started burning out and kind of crashing. But
Yeah,
that was a huge, almost a confidence check, saying you can do this, and not only can you do this, but you can do this well. It was that how was that experience for you, just in the first year or two of being
yeah.
successful in vet
It's
school?
it's not how I saw it. Like I never ever thought that. I always was in like fight or flight. Like like I don't. I don't consider myself to be above average intelligence. I think I'm a very normal person. I think one of the most difficult things that people can do, and this is going to get a little philosophical here,
Sure.
but it's how honest are you with yourself,
Mhm.
you know? And that's something that I learned like at the community college level, which is like, when do you know when you've learned something, and when do you know when you still have a lot of work to do? But you have to be honest, right? Because your kind of ego comes into play, and you're like, and then it's also your work ethic. Like you get a little tired, and I don't want to read anymore, and oh, I get it enough. I'll be ready for the test. But I was always in that mode in school. Like it was always fight or flight. I never thought to myself like, oh, here's like I did well on this test, therefore I know I can do it. It's no. I always think that if I don't do my absolute best and I fail, I wouldn't be able to live with that.
Yeah.
If I do my very best and I fail, I sleep very well at night. But assessing whether or not you truly did your best,
Mhm.
it's a rough conversation to have with yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that was like my whole mindset in vet school. I just let me do everything that I possibly can so that when it's said and done, there's nothing really left here to be down about, And so sometimes it ends up working out, and sometimes it doesn't. Like, yeah, like I did well in physiology, but like it turns out I'm not very good at anatomy. Like I'm not good at point blank memorization. Memorize this muscle.
I feel like that there's that a lot of people put pressure on themselves, and that's also why you fit in as a veterinarian, because that is a very veterinary mindset. We're so hard on ourselves and put so much pressure to have to we're in this constant feeling of survival mode, just because of
Yeah,
the sheer pressure that we have and that we place on ourselves.
yeah.
It's
It's
interesting
almost like
because
a defense mechanism.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
took it a little bit of a different way because I think to me, like you said, it's kind of a characteristic of a vet, but it's almost like you have to keep reassessing your prior assumptions. And I feel like that's exactly, what you were doing, Isaac. But
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me,
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
yeah, and that's what we need to honestly be successful as vets is, not to just keep assuming you've got the right conclusion,
right,
from the
right.
beginning. You've got to keep reassessing that. So, no,
And
I
and
mean,
it's quite possible that's not just a vet thing. That could be like just like a
sure.
general rule of thumb
Yeah,
of life,
fair.
you
Yeah,
know?
that
All
makes
right.
for a successful
Yeah.
vet.
All right. Seeing as though you are a Caribbean vet student, I think in the veterinary field it's not as poorly seen as in the human medical field, but there is still a level of a stigma against Caribbean vet students. I've definitely faced that when, like, I was telling you at NAVC or at VMX, when I would go to that, there were some classes or some students from certain schools who would look down on what school you go to. And I saw a little bit of that. And occasionally you'll see that in practice. Have you noticed any differences between Ross graduates and other graduates from state schools, Isaac? And it's just in your experience now as you've developed as a veterinarian?
I haven't, but I don't think I've met like my pool,
Mm,
my sample size is just not big enough for me to make any kind of conclusions about that. But I'm trying to think back. I don't think so,
mhm,
but it could be that I don't really assess things like that.
mhm,
You know what I mean? I don't ever consider like I only consider what you're saying.
mhm.
And is what you're saying reasonable? Is it intelligent? And is it true? And then outside of that, like, dude, I don't care where you're from. I don't care who you are. If
Sure.
you're saying true stuff, you're saying true stuff.
Okay.
You know?
I love
Yeah. So
that.
yeah, my brain doesn't operate like that. I never ever consider I like what purpose does it serve?
Yeah.
You know?
It probably stems from an insecurity and a chip on your shoulder of just saying, validating your worth. At least that's where it comes from
Oh,
me.
oh,
So
oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, I could see that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That just clicked. So yeah, like I'm sure a lot of people, dude, if you pay me enough money, I'll do whatever. I'll be the janitor. And you'll have the shiniest floors you've ever had. Like in life, for me, I just don't have that like ego and it's I'm here to learn. If you're, let's say you think that Caribbean vet students aren't up to par, you absolutely could be right. Let's find out.
Mhm.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Let's
Yeah.
And
find out.
I actually have some background with this because my dad specifically actually really liked the Caribbean vet students, which he graduated way back in the 60s. So it was definitely a different time back then. But like the stigma was definitely, from his description, seemed much more prevalent. right? I think we're seeing kind of holdovers from a different time.
Fair.
But for him, he felt that the Ross grads had a lot more hurdles to jump over, in part because of that stigma, right? Like they tended to be people that kind of had, I guess, a similar approach that you do, Isaac, that, you just prove yourself at the level of, do you know stuff? Are you a good person? Like, are you passing the marks that actually matter? And versus, leaning back on whatever credentials you got from whatever school at the time was the best vet school. And so
Right.
he actually was the opposite. He really was excited when he met island students, because they seemed to be much more driven. They tended to be the vets that wanted to try to get into practice ownership. And so he really loved working with them. And I would say, honestly, at least for me, that's carried over, that, that's been true in my life, that I would say that I have, if anything, the opposite. Like, Ross grads to me have been some of the most awesome people I've met. I love like meeting new Ross grads, because yeah, it's just, I don't know. And I don't know if it's like a culture that kind of develops at Ross, or like what it is, or if they're just admissions strategy works to try to get, students that are like that. I mean, you guys would know better than I would.
I think their
But
admissions process is just take whoever. Well, no, that's not fair to say, but I mean, the way I
just
always
grab
see it,
people off
right?
the street.
I know, right? I'm going to get an email, like a cease and desist with Ross. No, I think that this has always been my thought. I mean, they're a very open for-profit school, and it's like, hey, we have requirements of getting into the school. If you fulfill them, we're going to give you a chance, and we're going to supply you with all the resources to allow you to be the best veterinarian you can be. So take it or leave it. And then it has a more of an open portal for more people to enter. You're going to have more people fail or not succeed, right? But I've seen people in our clinical year, right? I talk this all the time. And again, this is just that chip on my shoulder. It's just like, you'll see people in your clinical year at CSU, and you see how much they're struggling and how poorly they're cooperating with the nurses or the staff. And in my mind, I'm like, how did these people, why did the school choose this individual over me? And I fit a rare demographic, Isaac even more, Egyptian male in veterinary medicine. Are you kidding me? But like, how would this person be able to get through this program? And I had to go overseas to get my degree. So
Yeah, and that's a fair reaction, right? And I think with any admissions process, there's going to be a little bit of a difficulty in really determining the merit of who should, who's going to be performing well several years out, right? There's a little bit of an arbitrary nature to it, which I hope brings comfort, to anyone who's listening, who's applied to vet school and hasn't got in. I mean, it's something that I think it's just, to some degree, is a little bit of a luck.
Yeah,
Thing,
I'm just gonna add, if that's all right. I'm just gonna add. I mean, listen, man, when you apply to a very competitive program and you get in, there is something to be said for that. All right. So it's like when you go to college, CSU, you go to Cornell, you go to Davis, whatever other school, these schools are hyper competitive. And if you get in, so that's an incredible accomplishment. You should be very proud. You shouldn't kind of lean back on it the rest of your life, but you can certainly lean back on it somewhat when you're applying for jobs. I mean, I think that's completely reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like making it to the NBA. Even if you're trash, man, you made it to the NBA. Yeah. I mean, how many people did you beat out? Even if you're on the bench.
That's fair.
Oh yeah.
I like that
get degrees.
Yeah.
All right, Remy, I know a bit of a trajectory off topic there, but I had to ask. Here, Remy, you want to jump into your next question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I don't know. Like, I want to, if it's okay with you, Isaac, I kind of want to go back into like more of the influence your parents had on like where you're at now, especially given the fact that you started working with them shortly after you graduated, right?
Yeah. So when I first graduated, I actually worked at a couple other hospitals.
Okay.
And then after I felt like I learned what I needed to learn. I just didn't want to jump right out of vet school and then be under my my parents' supervision. Just, I want to experience the real world and see what's up and how I stack up first. And after I was satisfied, then I went back to the clinic that my parents work at. And yeah, I mean, they're very influential my whole life, but never really directly. I mean, maybe I'm just not remembering, but a lot of it was like I just saw the work ethic. I saw these are people trying to make a better life for themselves. Nobody sat me down and told me like, hey, this is what it means to work hard.
Right.
This is what it means to try to do the right thing, especially when nobody's looking. It's all kids kind of observe their parents, especially behind closed doors, and that's when you pick up on that stuff, really. That's how you pick up on moralities, and you see it when your parents are doing it and nobody else is around. I think I could be wrong, but so like I said before, I mean, I was never really pressured into going into veterinary medicine, but I'm very glad that I did. I know it's a tough job, but it's a good job. It's a rewarding job. There's always something to do. There's always something new to learn.
Yeah. Were they happy that you ended up working with them?
I think, were they happy that I became a vet or that I ended up working with them?
Working with them. I would imagine, it seems like your parents, much like Remy's parents, were really hard workers, arguably even workaholics. That's typically how it is with people over, even my parents, right? Overseas, who come into America and want that barrel of gold. They just worked themselves to the bone. So after their eldest son, ends up getting a degree and works under them, is there almost this feeling of relief that they have someone they can rely on whose blood to help, I wouldn't go as far as they take over the business, but help take care of a lot of that responsibility and get some of that work
Yeah.
off their shoulders?
I mean, we've never talked about that, but I
Mm.
mean, just practically speaking, like if I had a son or a daughter and they helped me run my business and they were competent, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. Obviously, working with family is always a little tricky. Family is very quick to tell you what's on their mind,
Uh-huh.
without a filter. Those are always interesting waters to navigate. But overall, I would say it's the best thing I've ever done,
Okay.
or at least one of the best things I've ever done, working with family.
So given the fact that you've kind of branched out a little bit and then come back to working more with your family, would you say that there's anything that, given the fact that they're vets that were trained in Egypt, that had the large animal predominant background and then came over and I assume brought some unique things that a lot of like US trained vets wouldn't have? I mean, what do you find anything that like stands out to you as your parents doing really well that you wish a lot of US vets kind of brought into how they practice, or is that
Um,
kind of a weird question? I don't know.
I mean, like comparing Egyptian vets to like vets in Egypt to vets in America, is that where what you're kind of wondering about?
I guess not that general, more specific to I guess, like you said, observing how your parents worked and working with them now. Would you say that there's anything that they do that you think is a really good approach to how they practice as vets, or what do they
Yeah.
bring
Oh,
that
okay.
you really want to keep bringing forward to your patients and your clients?
Yeah. One of the things my folks do absolutely exquisitely is sort of make the environment very comfortable for learning. There's always the pressure of being a good doctor, right? But in order to be a good doctor, there's a huge learning curve. I mean, real practice is not like, at least in my experience, has not been like vet school at all. You know, there's so many caveats, there's so many gray areas where you're sort of left with making decisions. And the more decisions you make as a doctor, the more seasoned you become, and so on and so forth. But to manufacture the environment that's so conducive for learning in a non-judgmental way, I think most people would do very well in that kind of environment.
Mhm.
I 100% agree with that. It kind of brought me to this next set of questions because it reminds me of our conversations that we've had before in terms of what role does an internship have in 2024, kind of how does the mentorship model look. And I think a lot of other hospitals probably don't provide the level of guidance and mentorship that we would like, partially because it's time intensive, it's resource intensive. And so I guess, is there anything that you feel are simple things that they do that really kind of just open up the room to learn and grow, or is it more just that they give you space to have your own growth, or what do they do that you feel works well?
To be honest, they're just very loving people, and not just with me, like in general. We've had people, other Rossies, do their hours and stuff at the hospital, and they're just like, it's very non-judgmental. It's very like it's a very loving environment, and we're all here to learn. Nobody, blame is not really a thing. It's very like problem solution oriented, but mostly it's just, you just feel so comfortable to say what you really think. You have those friends, like there's different groups of friends, right? Where you guys will be in the middle of a conversation and talking about something, let's say that's like really like a fiery subject, and you're just so comfortable to say your opinion, even if it's a crazy opinion and it's wrong. But like the environment is so conducive to learning that you can just come up with any idea you want and just throw it out there and get legitimate feedback, as opposed to somebody being like, okay, you're a dummy, stop talking.
Yeah. So it sounds like they put a lot more effort into listening and compassion than they do with strict rules and guidance, or I guess, direct lecturing.
I wouldn't say more, but they view it as just as important.
Mhm.
Because in the game of medicine, the rules are important. You gotta know, physiology and all the basics to play the game.
Mhm.
But just being in an environment where you can really try new ideas and get feedback about it
Mm.
is really important. At least for me, that's how I learned the best, and that's the kind of environment that I do really well in.
Nice, man.
That actually, this is probably a whole nother podcast episode on its own, but I think there is a worthwhile discussion to be had around the concept of a blameless analysis of aspects within the veterinary world. And I guess I'm making a parallel to like the aviation industry, where if someone makes a mistake, the approach is usually one where they go in and don't necessarily find the culprit of who caused the mistake. They find out what process allowed that person to make the decisions they did to cause
Right.
the disaster, whatever. And it seems to be fairly effective in terms of really saying, okay, for the future, we've now prevented this because we put, XYZ safeguards in. And I think medicine is a field that may not do that very well. But I think that's a really good industry where potentially, because we look at if there's a quote malpractice or whatever that occurs, it's very much fixated on who did this, whose name is on the paper. But that doesn't necessarily help us to say, okay, how do we set up safeguards to prevent that situation in the future? And it just sounds like the way your parents kind of approach things and how you approach stuff is very much, let's give room to allow people to, consider new ways of doing things, stuff like that, and give compassion to each other instead of really having like this prescription of here's the right way to do things. And to me, it just sounds like a better environment to
Not
really,
as rigid, it seems.
yeah. And I wonder if that's also kind of the direction that we as an industry can potentially say, okay, we need to value this approach to things. And then on top of that, say, okay, how do we analyze our processes as opposed to really like, I don't know. I'm going too deep with this. And like I said, it's something
That is his nickname
Yeah,
here.
it just got me thinking.
I mean, listen, the job, anybody who's done the job knows just how stressful it is. And usually, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, usually veterinarians are the kind of people who apply unbelievable amounts of pressure on themselves.
Mhm.
Like you just expect excellence all the time, right? So then you combine that internal dialogue and that internal pressure that you have with yourself with an external one. And then you wonder why so many people are on antidepressants and the anxiety's through the roof. And so I don't think maybe it is sustainable, but it's certainly not an environment I'd want to be working in for 40 years.
Agreed.
That would take a toll.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was just gonna comment that I've definitely met vets that have the mentorship approach of like, making that feeling as almost like a teaching tool in itself, that you have that anxiety, you have that stress that kind of pushes you to learn faster. And, I agree with you that I think it needs to continue to be a prominent topic within our field about, is this level of chronic stress that we're putting on each other, sustaining from the outside, is that a sustainable thing in the future? But
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like it.
It's definitely
I would say we're past the point of where I think it's healthy. I think we need to really try to work to dial this back a little bit.
Mhm.
But so that's why, I'm interested in kind of how it sounds like you guys are doing things right, that you've managed to get an environment that isn't as stressful in some respects. And,
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to go to work, man.
Yeah.
I'm happy to
which
go to
is awesome. That's how it should
work.
be.
It's good. Now that we are on the topic of management, it does seem like your parents have kind of, you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe even given you the keys to really kind of head start this hospital and give you a lot of responsibility in terms of practice management. And I wouldn't say ownership, but I guess would a medical director be a good term to use for your hospital? Sure.
Sure.
Right. Well, what's that been like? Because I mean, we're obviously both 6 to 7 years out at this point. So we're kind of at that point where we've really hardened a lot of our clinical experience. So now to combine practicing with also business management, hospital management, how has that been for you?
Yeah. It was a very natural progression. Uh, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that my parents own the hospital, right? So anytime something happens, the staff is coming to me and they're like, "Hey, this is what's going on. What do we need to do about it?" So I never really thought of myself as like just a vet. I'm the guy you bring your problems to, right? And my sisters are also like this because at the end of the day, it's a family business and we're responsible. And so it was a very natural progression. There was no like, oh, I'm a associate vet, boom, medical
Okay.
director.
Okay.
It's all mixed all the time.
What are one of the biggest things that take up your mental space aside from the medicine practice? So as a hospital manager, what are your biggest roles? What are the biggest fires you have to put out on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
So I would say there's many different angles you can take. There's the client aspect of things,
Mhm.
making sure everybody is, not waiting too long in the lobby. There's managing employees, you know what I mean? Sometimes because you're basically trying to mitigate humans
Mhm.
on top of the stress of doing the job. And so there's a level of emotional intelligence you have to have. You have to be able to know when you're pushing too much and then when you're not pushing enough. Like somebody's showing up late to work and it's the fourth time this week. Let's say they're 20 minutes late. Do you address them? How do you address them? When do you address them? And then any business owner knows that sometimes you let things slide, right? You don't want to be 100% confrontational all the time, because you're dealing with people and people have egos and I have an ego. And sometimes that needs to, the angle we take is, well, what's best if the business had a voice and it could speak, what would it say? What does it want to happen? Well, it wants to pump out as many healthy pets as possible. That's the effective goal of any hospital, right? And so does me confronting somebody all the time going to result in that or not? And if you think it is, have at it. But it's a difficult role to play and it's a stressful role,
Yeah.
especially if you're a non-confrontational person naturally, it
Mhm.
does take a toll on you for
Absolutely.
sure.
So it's a balance of, so would you say it's dependent on the individual staff member? Let's say, for the example you're using, right? If they're late, if there was one employee, if you have two different employees, but they're both late, just based on their personality, do you kind of have to work around that and how you confront them, whether or not you do?
Absolutely. You have to know who you're talking to. There are some people that do really well with direct confrontation.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Other people, it needs to be packaged up in like a nice little piece of candy,
Yeah.
and that's how they receive the information. Because if you're talking to somebody, especially about things like of that nature that
Mhm.
are a little bit uncomfortable, you don't know who you're talking to, it doesn't matter what the issue is. They didn't hear you.
Yeah.
All you've done is create more potential animosity, more issues at work. You know what I mean? And we've all experienced this. This is not
Of
necessarily
course.
just a medical director,
Mhm.
and this is like a human thing. You experience it with your friends, with acquaintances, and so on.
Yeah, I say this often, especially in the podcast, but something I've learned in my 30s is that a lot of people, they just want their feelings to be acknowledged and they just want to be heard. I don't think a lot of the times, sure, you give me a solution because I'm asking for it, but most of the time I just want to vent and I want someone to tell me your feelings are valid. You feel this way because you should feel this way, or you're allowed to feel this way. And that's something where, when you talk about the way you manage and this leadership role that you have, a lot of this comes down to that EQ and how you have to talk to your staff, right? Or at least acknowledge their own hardships and the reasons of why they might be giving the hospital the difficulty it might be facing.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah, it's not an easy role to do it effectively. And anybody can do it, but to do it
Mm.
effectively and mitigate, it's like it can be
It
challenging
sounds
at
tough,
times.
man. It sounds tough. That's why I had to ask, because yeah, I mean, me just practicing itself is already very difficult. So adding on having to be a leader for X amount of people, whether it's 5, 10, or 20 or 30, on top of it, I could see you just had a 30-minute consult about skin with one client. You get out of the room and someone goes, "Hey, Dr. Atalla, Casey's late again for the 30th time," or they're texting on their phone, or there's some issue here, or this client's complaining about the bill, and you're trying to get some medication for this patient, but now you're pulled to the side to have to mitigate this problem. I mean, I would imagine that happens on a daily, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not on the daily,
Yeah.
but I get your point. And yeah, it happens frequently, and it happens. It's this is not just a veterinary thing. This
Mhm.
is a human thing. Everybody sets up sort of guidelines. Everybody sets up parameters of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And when those parameters are trespassed, not only are they addressed, but the manner in which you're addressing the issue is probably more important than what you're actually saying,
Yeah.
in my experience.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. So, kind of now, another kind of translation, right, is you have this leadership, this management role in the hospital, and recently you've announced a service that you've created called Hubavet.
Yeah.
And this now, that translation goes into now you're not just managing a hospital with people, you're managing this service that essentially hires or contracts veterinarians to do a certain service. Can you, first off, why don't you tell me what Hubavet is and tell me more about it?
Yeah, let's see. What do they tell me to say here? Hubavet is a telemedicine. So it's a telemedicine platform designed for the veterinarian. And what I'm hoping happens is that veterinarians basically use this however they see fit. I'm sure there's a ton of different applications and business models that can be used with it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like an open-ended thing. I mean, you play with it. If you think it's useful, use it. If you don't think it's useful, don't use it. If you can't determine, suspend judgment until you figure it out. I'm hoping that people just give it a shot and use it however they see fit, and if that means that you just want the relief doctor just wants to see some cases on the side, fine. If you want, the way I'm using it is sort of I've incorporated into the hospital to like see rechecks and give people advice on generally healthy animals. And what I'm hoping happens is that we decrease the traffic of general cases that come into the hospital that are non-urgent, so that the animals that truly need medical attention, the staff is there for them. We're prepared for them, as opposed to every doctor hates walking into dog got hit by a car. Where's my staff? They're explaining flea medicine to a client in the
Doing nail
room.
trims on a
You know,
angry chihuahua.
right, doing nail. Right,
Yeah.
right. So I'm hoping to reduce that caseload. Like if you just need some flea medicine, or your dog's got a rash or a little bit of diarrhea, just started and look at the dog, he's generally like bright and alert and everything. It's an option.
I mean, 5 years down the line, where are you envisioning the balance in an ideal sense? If it's being used in the way that I mean, I know you said it's an open-ended thing, but I guess in terms of kind of an ideal concept of the balance, would you say 30% of cases are seen in a platform like Hubavet, or is it just kind of you're just going with where it's going, or what's
I'm
your
not
concept?
sure. I'm not sure. Every time I tell people about it, and I show people the beta, I mean, they come up with new ideas of how to use it on the spot. I mean, case in point, I was presenting it at Western Veterinary Conference last month, and a doctor comes up to me. She's an intern. She's in Arizona. She was going to do a residency program, and she was like, "Oh, this is a great way for residents to make money on the side." And I never really thought about residents and how poorly paid they are, and how this might be an additional source of income for them during the residency program. So that's what I prefer. I prefer, like, use it however you see fit.
Mhm.
Incorporate it into your hospital, work from home, work as an additional source of income when, let's say, you're a resident. I mean, so hopefully that answers the question kind of. I know I didn't answer exactly the
Yeah,
question.
no, I mean, honestly, now it almost sounds even bigger than what I was initially picturing, which was that my initial impression was like it was like a service that you were offering for vets, but now it almost seems like it's an ecosystem, like a platform that you're allowing
Right.
vets to establish kind of their own, I guess, businesses within Hubavet
So
as
that's
an
exactly the point.
ecosystem.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, it's look, people are creative. All I want to do is what we've done is we've manufactured the platform,
Mhm.
and then hopefully people take a look at it and use it as you see fit. And if you don't see that it fits, fair enough, don't use it. And if you think you can sort of leverage either your knowledge base or your time to make an additional source of income, have at it.
Okay.
Awesome.
When starting this, what are some new skills that you had to either learn or polish on for this? Because again, this is outside of working with your employees. This is outside of practicing medicine. This is now almost, you mentioned all these things, and ultimately does have to come into advertisement, right? And promoting this product, going to Western. What skills did you have to kind of resurface, polish, improve, learn among starting Hubavet?
Yeah, well, definitely, I learned a lot at Western. I learned a lot about sales at Western. Just the most minor details make the biggest differences. I mean, the difference between sitting and standing. So, what skills did I learn? I mean, or did I have to polish? For sure, the people skills, but you kind of already have that with the job that we normally do, right? Because we're talking to clients all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, we're already in a way, veterinarians are salespeople, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to at some point convince the client why your dog that just got hit by a car needs a methadone injection. And luckily, most people don't need much convincing of that, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So for sure, the sales. I mean, I'm learning about marketing, and that's a whole side of things that I didn't really realize how large the marketing infrastructure in the United States was. And not because it's not, it's because I'm naive. I had no experience with it.
Yeah, totally. And not against you. That's definitely something that I've also seen recently. I mean, it's things, the amount of money spent on just pure advertisement of a product is insane. It's mine. I
Yeah,
couldn't fathom it until I saw the numbers in front of me.
I've
right.
definitely had
Yeah,
moments where I see skyscrapers that I had no idea what those companies were, and then I find out it's marketing, advertisement, and it makes sense now.
Can you share any marketing strategies that you've come across lately that you're going to be implementing?
So, I mean, it's for now, it's the basics. Really, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire a marketing team. And the reason I'm going to do that is because, quite frankly, I'm very aware of my limitations.
Mhm.
And I know that this is not my forte. And that in order for things to be done professionally and to be done right, finding the right people
Mhm.
to join your team is probably the most important thing I've learned so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm probably just gonna hire a marketing team. But like the social media is going to like different conferences and presenting it. And one of the things that really helps is being in the profession myself. So when I was designing it, I'm designing it the way I would want it to flow as a veterinarian.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Which becomes a very useful for sure. And then with regards to like how the app is going to be designed and how it looks from the client's perspective, like you do reading and you're like, hey, like why did Instagram build it like this? Why did they select those words and not these words? And it's the amount you learn really just depends on how much time and dedication you put into it.
Yeah. Is your end goal in the most ideal sense, right? In the vision that you have here, would this be something where you would be managing this and then is your end game to stop practicing and be able to put all of your
No,
time into
no,
Hubavet? No. So solely
no.
always going to be a side project.
Well, it depends. I mean, if it gets really big, I don't know. I don't I just don't think like that. I'm
Okay.
very much like solution and problem oriented, like on the spot. If hypothetically it got to be that big of a business and I had to make a decision,
Mhm.
I don't see myself stopping clinical practice. I just enjoy it too much. I love people and I
Mhm.
love pets. I'm not all for that. In the community, we hear a lot of, I like animals way more than I like their owners. Like, no, man, I love people a lot.
Yeah.
People are awesome, especially as a vet, getting the opportunity to listen to their stories in the room. You start to really understand why people become so attached to their animals, because it's not just always the love that the animals show the people.
Mhm.
It's like the stories behind the animal, how they got the animal, you know. Like I have this guy with a dog, and the dog comes in, it's got like an oral cancer. Now, I didn't biopsy at the time when I first saw the dog, but it was obviously potentially like a malignant melanoma. And so, you know, I got a little sample from it, looked under the microscope, and you see little pigmentations in the cell. And I eventually convinced him to biopsy it. And he's telling me that the dog, if it is a malignant melanoma,
Mhm.
it's the same thing that took his wife the year before, right? And so you're just sitting there, and at this point, like I'm no longer a vet, right? Now I'm a human being. And so how could I not love people like that? And there's so many different stories, and not
Oh
all
yeah.
of them are that sad, but yeah, I could never give up clinical practice, man. I love people too much, and I love their animals, and there's something about physically being there that telehealth will never be able to do.
Mhm.
But certainly we can use telehealth as an adjunct
Mhm.
in improving the quality and care for pets, and making people's lives a little bit easier. Not everybody can get into the hospital at, you know, and wait 2 weeks, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. No, I love it, man. I'm really excited for you. You know, and I'm so proud of you to, I mean, that sounds condescending. I don't mean to sound condescending, but you know, as a classmate, just kind of see how all of our classmates grow and how things have developed to now see you kind of, you know, jump into this kind of project so wholeheartedly and put yourself out there.
Yeah,
It's cool, man. I'm really excited to see how this goes, whether it's in
appreciate it,
5 months or
bro. I
5 years.
really
Yeah. Best of luck, dude.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing the ideas that people come up with, you know, when the oceans of your life are sort of like
Yeah.
calm. So I'm excited, man. I really appreciate it,
Yeah.
and I hope it works out.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then so be it.
So be it.
Yeah. The approach you're taking, I think, has a lot of potential because, like you said, there are people that are going to have ideas that the rest of us have not thought of, right?
Yeah,
So it's putting that on the platform and helping them grow the idea. Like it's almost a partnership in the way to be able to do that. So, I mean, from what you described, it sounds awesome. So, you know, I think it's a really good addition to the field. And, you know, tech is growing so quickly that we have no idea in 5 years where this is going to go. But I think
yeah,
you're positioning it really well for that kind of future, right? Where we have no idea where things are going. So,
yeah, yeah. I'm just here. I'm here for the ride, man. I'm here for the ride. Like so I do quite a bit of running
Uh,
monthly, like a neighborhood of
you,
like 50 to
you've done
70
some
miles a month.
marathons, haven't you?
One
oh,
marathon.
well,
Okay.
I just wanted to test the
That's
waters
that's
and see if
cool.
I could. Um, but yeah, so while I'm running, you know, your body sort of gets used to running all the time, and so you know, when the labored breathing stops, um, kind of have, but you end up having 30 minutes of just like free time to think, and so that's when I kind of came up with it, you know.
Oh.
So I was just like, oh, I wonder what a telehealth app looks like for veterinarians, and then I went and looked for it, and I didn't really find anything. I mean, there's one out of Canada, but I like the rules were, or the regulations didn't really permit most states to allow veterinarians to practice telehealth, but recently that's changing. I mean, in California, it just changed a couple of months ago where now we can. And so I was like, well, I can't find it. Why don't I just build it? I wonder like how much this would cost. And at the time, like I had no idea what a developer was. I had no idea what like coding is. And you know, I'm just like very casually looking into stuff, and then one idea turns into another, and then all of a sudden I'm down the rabbit hole. I'm like, yeah, how did they build Facebook? You know, how that works, you know? And yeah, man, I found the right people. I don't know how I found these people. I mean, they're so effective, they're so intelligent. And yeah, after that, it's just a matter of consistency and seeing it through, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
it's exciting.
All right, guys, let's move on to our OMA sarcoma. All right, this is kind of the last part of the podcast here. Isaac, I told you a little bit about this before we hit the record button, but of course, OMA, something positive, something that gives some good vibes that you want to share. Sarcoma being, again, a little bit the opposite. I actually didn't, I always, this is the reason why I talk about like maybe not having this anymore, just because I never come prepared. I don't know if any of you guys have any OMA sarcomas, kind of locked and loaded, but I probably won't go first this time
I
just
got
because I have
some.
to think. All right, Remy goes first, and then maybe Isaac or me, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Cool. Yeah, so for once, I actually am prepared on this. So my OMA is that I ended up getting this new Vans hat at the
Sick hat, man.
I
Oh.
know, right? No, it's something that I actually love.
Welcome to California, bro.
I know, right? So no, I actually really love Vans.
He
Like
does.
the shoes, like everything. I should be like a sponsor of Vans, right?
Yeah, you should.
Um, but I also actually really like wearing hats all the time, which I haven't worn one on the pod yet, but I'm like, hey, let's go for it, right? So it's a new hat. But anyway, my wife really wanted me to kind of refresh the hat lineup that I've got, right? So this is now a new Vans hat to the addition. So yeah, I'd say that's my OMA
That's
because
great.
I don't know, I like it.
I was gonna say that's a
Something
beautiful looking
small.
hat on you. It was actually
Oh, thank you.
distracting for most of the time, but I had to keep myself composed. So.
So it's actually to replace the other red hat I had, which my dog ate the top off of. And like my wife was, of course, very sad about it. She was just like, no, I love the red hat. So here's the replacement. So
Looks good, man.
do I go with my sarcoma as well?
We'll
Or
actually
should we go a round of omas?
let's snake
I
around.
haven't
So
figured this out.
we'll have Isaac
Okay,
do his OMA, I'll do my OMA, and then my sarcoma because it kind of goes hand in hand,
go
and
for it.
then we'll tie back to you.
So my OMA started like this newest one started last week. I actually picked up skimboarding.
I have no idea what that is.
Is that the where you jump on the board on the water and it's just you kind of
Yeah, dude, it is
Okay.
so much fun, bro.
cool?
It's ridiculous. It's
Very
like a
good
little,
for
it's
this.
like a mini surfboard made out of fiberglass, or I don't know what it's made out of, but you basically just throw it onto the water and just hop on and hope that you get deep enough to catch a wave. Dude, it's so fun.
Is it scary? Because
It's so fun.
I've seen it and I've seen like kids do
Okay.
this. And I'm like I don't like I'm terrified because I don't like my center of gravity is probably not as good as yours. So like I'm just worried about just completely slipping and eating it. Is that do you have to just get over your fear of that and then you just go for it?
Yeah, you got to get over your fear of that, Alfred. Come on, bro.
I know I can't,
There's,
man.
there's a whole world out there,
I know I
man.
can't. I see
Is it
bananas on the floor. I just have to walk around it, man. I just can't do it.
Yeah, but there is a heavy price to pay. Like your first, there's a learning
Well,
curve, man, and sometimes the learning curve hurts real bad.
mhm.
You know, especially your shins.
Yeah. Well,
But
it's
it's so much.
side thing, man. So it seems like a lot of your off time thing activities is outdoors. So you go running, skimboarding, is it called?
Yeah,
Yeah.
skimboarding.
All right. What else? Are you doing anything else on the side as an activity? Like, or
Play basketball,
still playing
volleyball.
ball? All right, man. Good for
Yeah,
you,
I gotta show these young people how it's
dude.
done, man.
You were nasty at Ross, man. The times you showed up, you were playing for sure, playing. Yeah,
Oh,
this guy's
bro,
nice, man. Yeah.
you're trying to make me blush,
No,
and it's
come
working.
on. Good for you. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see you so active because a lot of people are
Yeah,
struggling.
dude, you have to, man. A lot of the reasons that I run, one of the unintended consequences of running is the physical pain takes away from the intellectual pain. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and so it's almost like the best way to relieve yourself. You're not really thinking about much when your legs are in a lot of pain.
On
You
fire.
know,
So you push
yeah,
yourself to get that runner's high every time, don't you?
yeah. I mean, I never really experienced the runner's high until I started prepping for the marathon,
Mm, mhm.
and then, it's like the first 5 miles suck, right? But then
Interesting.
around like mile 7 or 8, you just start feeling jolly for no reason. You know what I mean?
It's the lack of oxygen to your
So,
brain.
Right.
It's just-
right. That's because you're gonna pay,
yeah.
yeah.
And then the wall, I think, comes at like mile 19 or 20, right? Is that usually what happens for marathons?
If I remember correctly, because this is a few years ago, but
Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Okay.
But by the end, you're just like, it's all adrenaline, man. You're just like, come on, we're
Cool.
almost there, you know.
Good for
But
you, dude.
yeah, dude, physically pushing yourself is a great way to relieve stress. It's a great way to improve your mood, at least in my opinion.
No, well said. All right, so my OMA, I'm gonna kind of then I'll do my OMA and then directly go into my sarcoma because it kind of goes hand in hand, and then maybe we'll snake back to Isaac and then finish with you. Okay, Remy?
Sounds good.
So I went to we went to a wedding in Colorado last week, so I saw Remy in person and Steph and everyone else from CSU, and everyone's able to meet my baby Mika. And then I went straight over to Cali and I met all my friends and family. Pam had this surprise lunch for me because I was hitting up all my friends going, hey, I'm going to be in town for a few days. Let's hang out. And no one was responding to me. And I was kind of like sad about it. And so like we go to this dim sum restaurant. I walk up to it and we open up like the quadruple doors and there's like 15 to 20 people, like my friends and family just there. And I'm like tearing up because like I've been dying to see them and wanting to meet my child. And so, yeah, this whole trip was just like a dopamine train ride. It was such a I didn't even realize how happy I was until we left. So that Oma obviously was going back home for a few days and seeing everyone, and then the sarcoma goes into the withdrawal of dopamine. So when we got home on Tuesday until probably like Friday, I was just a zombie. I felt very, very down, very sad, again, very withdrawn from just I think all the positive chemicals that were going on. And so I'm recovering it from it now, but that was a pretty rough couple of days coming home.
Man, I hear it.
So
my sarcoma is not quite that deep.
Depression isn't
much. It's like I don't know what I'm thinking from here because what I'm about to say seems.
I found a loose thread on my shirt. That was pretty down. That was pretty bad.
Yeah. Oh man, that's too funny, dude. But I'm gonna say it anyway. My sarcoma. Listen, I don't know if you guys eat Takis.
Yeah.
But there's nothing more sarcoma-y than opening up a bag of Takis and like the little tortillas have no chili powder on it. Like I get sued by the manufacturer.
What?
Yeah, man, it's a real bummer for me.
Call the number in the back, get your money back, because that shouldn't be happening. Questions, concerns. Spend 4 days trying to get
this is California, man. We're lawyering up.
I know, right?
As advertised.
This podcast is not sponsored by Takis.
But it could be, guys. We'll talk later.
I know. Call me.
Well, not after dunking on them with no chili powder. I like the parallel depression. No spice on Takis.
Yeah. The feelings are the same, though.
Absolutely. 100%.
I think my sarcoma is that. So as part of my wife's residency for ophthalmology, she has to go between 2 locations. And she just started going to the far location, which is a 2-hour drive one way.
Oof.
So we're beginning the month of that. So it's always kind of a downer when we enter that, just because it's tough, right?
Yeah.
Like she's got a full day of work, and then on either side of that, it's like a 2-hour drive. So just gearing up for that, and we'll get through them.
That's not as worse as Takis, but I think it's still pretty rough.
Yeah, I'm starting to regret my answer.
Wait, how many more months does she have for this whole month trip? Because she's entering her 3rd now, right? Her 3rd year?
No, she's still in her 2nd. Well, yeah, I mean, she'll be coming up on her 3rd year, but yeah, she alternates between. So I think a month on, month off on doing that. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure she has it down to the exact number of months that she has to do those long drives. Sure. But yeah, it is what it is. Obviously, the residency is never easy, so that's kind of one of the tough aspects for us. But she's getting through it.
It's all
forever,
temporary.
Stay positive.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey, that's all I got for the podcast today. All right, guys. Isaac, dude, thanks so much for taking the time here and chatting with us.
It was awesome having you on.
Putting your time into our growing podcast and sharing your thoughts. It's good to catch up with you, hear about your stories, and of course, learn more about your vision with things. So.
And if you want to come back on and give us updates, because I really want to, I want to hear just your check-ins on how things are going with Hubavet, because it sounds like something that, it'll be cool to hear your behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'd love to, man. Thanks so much for inviting me. I had so much fun. I didn't think it was going to be this fun. I really didn't.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we try to create a nice environment. We try to make this, relatively light.
You guys are so professional. I could never do that. I would go off so many tangents all the time.
Oh, you should see our first few episodes. We're trying learning progress, man.
Yeah.
We get a lot of tangents.
Oh, you guys did great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, man.
I had a blast.
Yeah, everyone, thanks for listening. Appreciate it. See you guys next week.
Have a good one.
Bye.